warriors, it is such an honor today to bring to you our very good friend, Nina DeJonghe, the Director of Public Policy at ECPAT-USA. ECPAT is on a mission and very accomplished in doing their work in protecting children from all forms of sexual exploitation. And we're going to let Nina fill us in about all of this, because after all, she is the expert. So welcome, Nina, to the program.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you for having me on today. As Lynn mentioned, my name is Nina DeJonghe. I'm the policy director at ECPAT-USA. I've been with the organization for just under 2 years. Our mission is to end the commercial sexual exploitation of children. ECPAT has been around for nearly 30 years, and starting out initially, our founder did a lot of work around sex tourism. We have 3 different pillars to the work that we do, one of which I know Lynn and I had discussed not too long ago on the podcast, but our educational initiatives, which focuses a lot on training on human trafficking prevention within schools for parents, teachers, and students. We noticed that at the height of the pandemic, the online exploitation had drastically increased. So seeing that, ECPAT-USA was able to develop online safety guides and curriculum and specific training to help combat this issue. Our other area is legislative advocacy, which is what I do. So I do both state and federal legislation and advocacy.
And that's the job of, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're like throwing so many things and I'm like, oh, I got to remember that. I got to remember that and go back. That is the description of a director of public policy, correct? Describe that for our, our viewers so they can really understand what exactly your job is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking it back. So I liaise with state and federal lawmakers and stakeholders in the space. ECPAT-USA, we are based in New York, but we have a national reach. So we work with our local legislators to advance and increase awareness on sexual exploitation and trafficking related issues throughout New York, and that subsequent training for prevention there. And then federally, Lynn, you're on our call, the NCOSI call that focuses a lot on the Earn It Act, or that focuses on the Earn It Act legislation that increases accountability and responsibility on behalf of tech companies for their role in the proliferation of child sexual abuse material. So we meet with lawmakers on Capitol Hill. I attend different briefings and panels to essentially, increase awareness and figure out best practices and ways that we can combat this horrific issue. Our advocacy ranges from, online exploitation. There are several different, intersections at bay here in the trafficking space, and looking at the intersections in terms of race as well, and looking at the disproportionate rates of trafficking and who those communities impact. ECPAT-USA, my background before coming here.
That was my next question. I'm like, tell us, who is Nina?
Yeah.
Go ahead, jump right in there.
Yeah, so I worked on Capitol Hill for about 4 years and focused a lot on child welfare and foster care legislation with the juvenile justice, criminal justice reform emphasis there. So here we know that trafficking impacts a number of different communities, and one of those being runaway homeless youth, children who are in the foster care system. These children face increased risks due to the different circumstances that they're in. So it is important, and some of the work that we do is ensuring that there are mechanisms and structures in place to monitor these populations. Children in the foster care system oftentimes, or homeless youth, get lost amongst the crowd.
That whole thing has to get blown up. Now, you don't have to agree with me. We need to start completely over, ground up with that whole foster care. Say what you want about this. I can't find one positive. I talk to a lot of people, work with a lot of people, or who have come through the system that are now even my age and 30s, 40s. What? And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't want to forget my questions. What is going on with that? Because we clearly have the studies. We clearly have, victims and survivors. We clearly know why. I don't know what to even say about this. Why is this? And there's so much money being poured into it, but it is so not working.
Yeah.
What do you see? What do you see like at ECPAT? Do they have any kind of plan, or it's just, tell us about that. Just anything about.
Yeah. So I would say in general, I mean, these are age-long, systematic
Right.
issues. I know right now there's actually a bill on the Hill, and it's the Find and Protect Foster Youth Act. And essentially it merges or marries the issue of runaway homeless youth, foster youth, with trafficking and exploitation. And it ensures, or it provides a feedback loop for states to work with the agencies that monitor children to better kind of assess and have an idea of where these children are, and ensure that we're able to reach them and get them the specific services that they need. I mean, it's obviously incredibly unfortunate. I think that it comes down to, a lot of times these issues, we will have legislation on the Hill or, in Congress, and then there's always an implementation problem, right? When it comes down
Always.
to the state. So yeah, it's a capacity issue. I mean, yes, we know that the United States government has ample funding for things, but it's just trying to figure out the ways to make it work in, like, on a county-based level, on a state-to-state level, because we'll see individual states that are developing and curating their own systems to combat or address these issues on their own, but without that repetitive, that sustainable funding, it's a moot point, right? And it's not long lasting, and unfortunately it's the children that continue to be at the end of that stick, even with the child welfare system, and in law enforcement, and the juvenile justice system. There are so many inefficiencies that exist when both of these systems are impacting or have the capacity to help the same population, or they do seek to help the same population, but we just haven't figured out the ways to make sure that it's adequate, and that it's what these children need. And it's very unfortunate, and it's the children that stand to continue to be victimized and exploited.
That's what I don't understand, because it clearly, you brought up the justice system doesn't work. I've been studying up a lot about that. I've been reading. You probably know better than I do that at any given night in America, about 2,000 youth are in adult prisons. I that's what I read from a well-vetted study recently. I'm not understanding that as, well, here I'm based in New York, where they're letting people out on the streets who are doing heinous crimes, and they're locked, no child should be locked up. So clearly none of this is working. I don't understand why. Is it just on the bottom of the burner that nobody's focusing on? I feel like our kids are really, and I always say this, Nina, there's like a war on for our children these days. That's how I feel. That's how I feel. I feel like kids have fallen to the bottom of the barrel. And these are our future, adults and running the country, or teachers or scientists. And how can we not take care of our precious kids, right?
Yeah. And that's an excellent point. And I think that in terms of legislation right now, I think there is a huge wave and momentum to pass legislation right now. Like, we're seeing all these different bills that are, passing, and members on both the House and the Senate side that are, really trying to fix these issues and pass meaningful legislation. That's another thing. We have messaging legislation that looks good but doesn't actually do anything. And then there's legislation, that actually has robust and comprehensive programs that'll actually help these at-risk populations. So I would say right now, I know we're still waiting on the Senate side for the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act to be introduced and eventually signed into law. But there's definitely the political will right now. And I hate to say that, because when we're talking about children, right, this should be the number one priority all of the time. But we know, American history, or, our U.S. history, we know, like you said, we're aware of these issues. even when we look at poverty, like we know poverty is an issue. We know that vulnerable children is an issue, and domestic violence and all of these things, but we still have not found a way to properly address it. So I'm hopeful. There are a lot of good pieces of legislation.
We have to be hopeful.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
and I think
I sent out a newsletter last week from the Warriors. It was, I think I entitled it "Changes in the Air," because I always want to remain positive, because you touched on something a few minutes ago. There is a lot of buzz like around different bills lately. There's a lot of talk. We're on that coalition call every Friday, which is, from people around the United States, all coming together because they want to talk about, they want to make change in their communities. They want information, right? So we have to look at how positive all of that is. And people contact me every day and they're like, why do you even do what you do? Why are you trying? Give up. You know what I say? That we shouldn't look at, let's see if this makes sense to you, Nina. Like, we shouldn't get stuck in, okay, it's bad. Like, we all know this is bad, everything going on. A lot of bad things happening right now. But we have to stay in, like, right now, take action, move forward. Stop wasting our energies on why all this happened. And let's take the energies and create how we can truly make change, help kids or help families or help any people, whatever, we're working on. So I feel very positive that there are so many people that want to be involved, or who do ask me on a daily basis, how can I help? What can I do? I don't want to get too involved, but like, what? And so I feel like that, it's swinging a little bit, the tides, it's a little bit changing into that direction. And I want to mention also, all of the issues we talk about are bipartisan. They really belong to no political party. We're talking human rights abuses. Everybody needs to get on board with kids, and again, with all people.
Absolutely.
Let's go back. Let me bring up that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I like to say there is, I don't like to say, there is an intersection between human trafficking and a big intersection with domestic violence. And I actually had somebody write to me this morning, correcting me, telling me, no, that doesn't happen. And of course, I'll just say she doesn't know what she's talking about, but explain when I say there's an intersection, how these two things are intertwined now that we're in Domestic Violence Awareness Month, because we all know somebody. I'm telling you, we all know somebody involved in domestic violence. We've seen it. We've heard about it, right? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 100% an intersection there. And even when we think about the different vices and ways that traffickers and people who exploit individuals kind of have that hold over an individual, I would say in the trafficking space, people who are trafficked or, exploited oftentimes, or a lot of times, are, experiencing domestic violence at the hands of their abusers as well. So domestic violence almost oftentimes is always a part of that experience for individuals. I won't say always, but we know that it's very prevalent. We can say that there, and it's another way, right, to keep individuals victimized and or to victimize people and keeping them vulnerable. But also it places that element of fear there as well, and it continues to keep somebody in that situation with their trafficker and abuser. And I think even when we were just speaking about children in foster care and homeless youth, oftentimes children, who are on the streets as well, are experiencing abuse, domestic abuse as well. These are not siloed issues. There's a lot of intersectionality that exists here. Intimate partner violence as well. I think actually we could talk a little bit about online sexual abuse, and I know we've talked about it on the Earn It and Cozy calls when we're talking about pornography. A lot of the imagery and videos that are illegally uploaded as well online depict the most heinous and aggressive forms of domestic violence and abuse as well. And we'll hear stories too about victims, but also the individuals that are perpetrating these crimes as well. The way that it hold on to them psychologically, right? They're seeing these forms of abuse, and they are playing this out with their partner as well, because they think that this is what an intimate experience, is
Well,
supposed
it's
to look like.
normalized.
It's normalized. Yeah. So,
right.
and it's incredibly harmful, but it's, pornography. I mean, we talk about the harms and the impacts of it over time, on a young, on an adolescent or on a youth. We know children have access to porn at much earlier ages now, but domestic violence is very prevalent throughout the porn industry. And like you said, it's normalized to the extent that this is what people think that their partners want.
Right. Especially, young people have grown up in this bubble, right? So I always say, like, 30 and under or in this bubble, it's not their fault. They've grown up with devices, right? When there are reports that 90% of 9 to 17-year-olds have an iPad or an iPhone, 90%. Well, it's like 88, but okay, we'll say 90 for argument's sake. And we know also from different studies, usually by the age of 11, a child has seen some form of pornography, or a friend of theirs has shown them something, because again, it's so normalized, people get habituated to this behavior, right? And there's also, which I find so disturbing over the last few years, teen girls in relationships, or whether, it's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, whenever girls are dating, that they are experiencing this violence in these, and these may be girls that, go home at night, they have this boyfriend in school, and we need to talk more about that this is not normal. But I'm so afraid that our young people, they're just being there's so much of this in society, not to mention all the disruptions going on all around us, that they're just accepting of this behavior. And we have to teach them no. And we have to get into the schools more. What do you say about that? Because I'm all about working on getting into the schools right now to have more appropriate, discussion about whether it takes on the form of what relationships should look like, digital safety. Explain a little more. I know I'm jumping all over here, Nina, but I have so many questions for you. You touched upon the psychological. I find that to be something when I talk to people, they truly don't understand. Like, that is the key component, one of them, that they'll be like, oh, I would run away from a trafficker. Oh, my child would never do that. If a child doesn't, has a parent, maybe, I'm just using this as an example, who's not present, right? Or maybe is a drug addict, I don't know, maybe whatever. Or they're abused at home. That is a vulnerable child who, when they run away or take off, these traffickers are so savvy and so smart, they pick up on this immediately. And if a kid is hungry after a day or two, they're going to go with somebody if they say, you want a sandwich or a hamburger. And people don't understand how they psychologically beat you down. That also goes for domestic violence. We have to talk more about that psychological aspect, because I'm still shocked that people that I consider smart don't understand. When I go out and educate, they'll be like, oh, no, we would just run away. No, you wouldn't. A 16-year-old who hasn't eaten in 2 days might just say, if a woman, for instance, was nice and came up to them, because we're noticing a lot of women working on behalf of men now, getting them back because they're more of a mother figure, a sister figure, come with me for a hamburger. And they go, and then they're trapped. But what do you say? Add a little more about this whole psychological, such a need for resources with all of this. What do you think about the schools? What can we be doing better in schools? For all of this?
I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, ECPAT-USA, as I mentioned earlier, right, our educational initiatives, advocacy and workshops that is within the schools and throughout the school districts. And it's important that we are having these conversations, because children, I mean, outside of the home, right, they're spending the majority of their day at school with their teachers and with their peers. And you had mentioned earlier that oftentimes, right, that women are used in the recruitment of children, but it also can be, traffickers will use children that are very close in age to these children too in the school. So they think it's a trusted person because it's one of their peers. So it's important that we are having these conversations on the ground in the schools. And as you had mentioned before, right, that sometimes the parents aren't home, aren't there to oversee or to monitor their children's at home, but also online usage as well. And there's even we could have to even look at digital literacy as a gap there as well, for children and parents. Oftentimes parents don't know how to navigate the internet or even can keep up with the different apps and technology that their children are using. And in terms of resources, right, and that psychological component, when there may be abuse in the home, or there's poverty, abuse, neglect in the home, the child is going to seek that comfort, and support, and love, whether it's it's obviously, if it's in a situation that's exploitative, or in a trafficking situation that's a negative, a trauma bond there. But these are young children with very vulnerable minds. And if someone's there offering some type of support for them, housing, shelter, companionship, that the child is not receiving, it is going to then they're going to go. And I think that oftentimes we still look at trafficking, not we, you and I, but in general, as this abstract concept.
Yes,
people still don't
yes.
think that it happens in the United
They don't
States
get it.
like it does in their suburbs. They don't think that it's happening, and it is. So we need to do away with these narratives that become barriers to adequately addressing these issues and providing supportive resources and programming. And it's very unfortunate, but education is key here to solving this issue, because we have to get to a place where people, one can better identify and respond to trafficking. But I think that it's even more important to have some type of formal education in schools. And I know a lot of people have different ideas and opinions in terms of what they want their children to be learning. But honestly, if a child is old enough to be exploited and trafficked, and abused, or to be experiencing these different types of things, these horrible crimes, they're old enough to learn about how to protect themselves and to be able to identify it. So at ECPAT, we are obviously, like I mentioned before, have this training, but, we believe that there should be some type of, there's no federal mandate, right, for human trafficking prevention in schools, but we believe that there should be, and this can be done at an age appropriate, culturally appropriate way, and you mentioned earlier talking about healthy relationships. That's important. It may seem very small scale and granular, but in this day and age, as we mentioned earlier, parents are busy. And if you have a parent, you're raised in a single family home, your mom may work 3 different jobs, and she's trying to do what she can to, keep food on the table and do et cetera, to make sure you have clothes and can go to school. It can be hard for them to be able to.
It's almost impossible. It's like designed. It's like the genie. It's the genie out of the bottle, Nina. And it's like impossible for poor parents or caregivers, to keep up with any of this, because as and I know, big tech and things going on, happening online are changing on a daily basis. It's like the predators are always one step ahead, right? The law lags behind technology. That's, by
dramatically.
Right. We're working on policy to create permanent change and update. But I find it so shocking that nothing as far as child safety since 1998 really has been updated with online and the internet. And this is a digital world, which I don't want to give back. I love being able to talk to you right now like this, research, write newsletters, whatever. But we have to leverage it for good and for safe. And so here's what I don't understand. There's so much, it's a little bit of, I'm digressing a bit. There's so much talk about this gender in schools. I'm in New York and New Jersey, kind of entrenched in it with the school systems. And that's acceptable to go full in on all of that. Well, I always say to everybody that I talk to, well, that's okay. But in addition, let's add in, as you said, age appropriate or culturally appropriate, some human trafficking or let's call it just digital safety education. That
There's
should
online
go.
safety, digital
That's
safety.
it, because that's where most of it's all originating from, right?
Yeah.
That's where it's happening. And when people fight me and say, well, I don't understand why this happens, I think we can both agree the bottom line is there's just a lot of money to be made. That's the sad truth about all of this, that the money is more important than kids' safety or human dignity. So what do you have to say about any of that? Or should we just let that be? Like, we have to just have online safety.
No, there 100% needs to be
I don't
online
know why they're
safety.
fighting so hard against it. I don't get it.
We need to, like you said, we don't need to give back the digital era. First of all, it's going to continue to progress in advance because
Yes.
that's all the only thing that it does. So what we need to do is provide children and parents with the necessary tools to keep up with technology. And when we talk about age appropriate, right? I mean, we can talk about in schools sexting, sextortion, catfishing, all of these things are happening with children in
Yes.
school,
It's
right?
reality.
Children are sharing nude photos with each other in schools as well. I mean, there's exploitative, situations where, we talk about all the time on the Earn It Act clause, when an image is shared or a child is being groomed and is sharing photos, not understanding the full implications, right, of what that act that they're doing is. But just it's so normalized within
That's it. But that's it.
children to just send photos to their peers because it's like the thing to do is also.
Yes.
So we need to talk to them about, okay, also once you send a photo, it's there forever. It doesn't just become
They
erased.
still deny it. They say to me, like, oh, Snapchat, it disappears. I'm like, now, once you put anything online, it can be found somewhere forever.
Yeah. It's found somewhere. So we teach parents, we teach children how to safely use the internet. And I think that, I know there's even rules in which and how we operate, or ECPAT operates the educational, training within schools too. Like, there's words and terminology because, right, people don't want you to actually say trafficking or sex trafficking and use these words, but it's also like, that's just as harmful because these things are happening to children. These horrific acts are happening to children. We have to be able to speak to that accurately and call a thing a thing. I'm all about that. But it's...
Yeah, me too. I don't get it because this is the reality. And the kids, like you said, I talk to a lot of teachers, work with some teachers. They're all telling me, and I'm saying this is so shocking, in kindergarten. Now, this is really shocking. But as you get into the 4th and 5th grade ages, they exchange nude images just like, it's no big deal, nothing. They don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's where we're failing. That's where we need to step up and demand that, K through 12 have education on things like that. So, I'm pushing for that all the time. Now, let me ask you. So we do have, just go back and explain one thing for our viewers: trauma bond. That is something that I'll see online a lot, but not sometimes really explained. So for somebody just watching this, what's a trauma bond?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a trauma bond, right, is where we'll talk about in a vulnerable, situation, right? You have a child, or it doesn't have to be a child, right? An individual that is going through whatever condition or circumstance, whether it's in an abusive type of situation, then is presented with an individual, say a trafficker, right? Someone that is there willing to falsely, right, provide some type of security in a way for an individual. And it's, even though it's a very negative situation for the person, right, who's being exploited, it becomes just a regular experience or normalized experience for them, even though they know like they're being abused, but they also aren't necessarily able to fully comprehend and conceptualize kind of the full implications of that. But they are confronted with a person that's giving them something, and it just becomes this repetitive cycle, abusive a cycle for this child or individual. But obviously it's very harmful. But when you are going through a situation,
right,
there's oftentimes gaslighting that is going on in there, and it's just a very healthy attachment to someone, even though they are causing harm to you.
right. That you think loves you or cares for you, or
yeah,
when they're just exploiting your vulnerabilities
yeah.
is basically. Let me ask you something. What do you see happening with Congress? Do you see some moves happening coming up? What's your opinion? Whatever you
Yes,
want to
I would
say
say,
or not say, you know.
yeah, I would say most recently, we're very excited to see Senator Durbin had introduced a bill, was just signed into law. The full name, but eliminating civil statutes of limitations for child sex abuse victims.
That's
So
a
this is
mouthful.
right. So that is a major win, right? So it removes that barrier or that specific time frame for someone to come forward and to talk about the abuse that they endured as a child. And I mean, this was motivated by Larry Nassar, who was the doctor, I believe.
Team doctor for USA Gymnastics. Yeah.
USA Gymnastics.
Oh, that's a horrible story. Yeah.
It's horrible, but that the bill, I mean, tries to correct ultimately the FBI's mishandling of several reported abuse of children for years.
So criminal. Yeah.
So yeah, it's awful. But it's a huge next step. So it was signed into law by the president about 2 weeks ago now. So I think that when we talked about that kind of momentum or that political will to get things rolling to correct wrongs and fix the system, I think this is a huge advancement in terms of the criminal justice system too. I mean, obviously the courts play a huge role in the lives of survivors of trafficking, and oftentimes, it's not skewed toward the victim. We know that the system can be re-traumatizing for victims. There's so much work to be done, but this right here, I think, is a beautiful next step
and so
there.
and positive. We've got to when we're done here, I'll be sharing that more, because we have to just keep up the positive too, so people don't lose their steam in thinking things aren't happening. We also have recently the Kids Online Safety Act, so we've got that happening, which I think there's momentum behind. We've been working on Earn It to hold big tech accountable, which that has to be done. Come on. So much has changed. Since the birth of the internet in 96, so much has changed. And so I don't understand, but don't let me get sidetracked here. Like, why don't we have yearly updates with the internet or something, like just part of, standard procedure, but maybe we'll get there. No, but maybe like we're at least we're starting to see, we've got, unfortunately we've got lawsuits, right? Where people are trying to hold them accountable. We've got, again, a lot of buzz, which I'm taking. It's very positive that we keep on top of messaging and spread this. Now, let me ask you, Nina. So ECPAT-USA, what if somebody says, oh, I like this Nina and this ECPAT. Like, how can I get involved? How should we direct them? What would be the best way?
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have people that reach out and try to get involved in the volunteer capacity with some of the work that we are doing. I know that some of our workshops on the ground in New York, there's people that can get involved there and helping out our different departments. I'm open.
You're open to suggestions.
I'm open. Yeah.
But you know what? I also tell people, money's always good, but we actually need, like I say, boots on the ground. We actually need, people. We need warriors. We also need, I'll say to somebody, even if you share, if it's a tweet or a Facebook story or one of the great studies, like that's doing something. Everybody, we can't do any of this alone. Like we need everybody to help. I call this an American crisis, what's going on, especially with our youth right now. All of this online. We know we have a youth mental health problem. I think of this as a big wheel with a lot of spokes. It's all connected, in my opinion. And we have to just keep talking and talking about it. Finish up with anything you'd like to say. First of all, I just want to throw out there, if anybody watching this or listening has any questions, please always Lynn at lynswarriors.org. I can direct them on to Nina. We'd be happy to answer anything for you if you need some help, right, Nina?
Yes, absolutely.
We're here to help. We're warriors. Finish up with whatever you want to tell us about, the landscape today. I don't know, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, first I would say, going back to how we can help our educational initiatives, right, with the training. If you know of individuals or organizations in your area that would be interested in having some sort of presentation on trafficking, we do a lot of work with the private sector, with hotels. So we have our certified training that hotels use to train their staff. Because hotels are a huge hub for trafficking as well. So I'm
glad you're bringing this up. Yeah.
So we have collaborated with Marriott and the AHLA, the American Hotel Lodging Association, to develop a 30-minute training. It's free to anyone. It's on our website as well, but it's used across the country as well. So it's an incredible way to, again, just keep pushing forward that education, because trafficking happens everywhere, right? And it happens in the supply chains, it's happening in different businesses, and it's important that people understand their role in helping to educate and combat this issue, because this requires a community response, and not just, we can't, do it alone. Like, it can't be just on law enforcement. It can't just be on the advocacy organizations. It requires just a multi-jurisdictional approach here, and leveraging all of the different expertise and knowledge that people bring to this space, because these predators and traffickers and the most horrible, predators in the world, right? They're very nuanced and skilled at targeting children. So, I mean, my hope, I'm very excited about all of the legislation that is emerging on the Hill, and just working with Lynn and all these other organizations that are just very passionate in this field to advance this issue, or to elevate this issue, to ensure that vulnerable children and youth and families have, right, the support that they need. I think that we are at a place right now, again, where we're able to get things moving. And I think right now with the hurricane, right, that are going on, when we have these national disasters that occur too, these are times that increase vulnerabilities for people too. We don't look at it like that, but crimes increase during these times, right? The government's resources and people's attention are placed in different areas. We saw during COVID-19, even internationally, the way that traffickers and people that stand to make a profit were working overtime during this time to figure out how they can reach and exploit people. So I think that, bearing that in mind, we just continue to ensure that we have our boots on the ground and are paying attention and trying to figure out how we can work together to move policy and fix these structural issues here.
Excellent. Nina DeJonghe from ECPAT-USA Warriors. The information for all of ECPAT-USA will be in the body of this video. The website is expatusa.org. You know what, Nina? I couldn't do my job without all of your expertise and your voice helping me, because I very much want to spread all of the good work being done and form more partnerships and really get into schools. So we're going to work on that. Well, I'll be talking to you a little bit more about that. I've got some things percolating.
Okay.
And I want to just say to you, thank you so much for being so dedicated and committed, because this is a tough subject, but I feel like we're at a crossroads. I feel like we're going to start seeing some real, we've already seen it, some change. At least we're talking about things. At least, we're getting out there. At least the public is starting, and my hope is, for instance, domestic violence, which was always so hidden, constant, and it's still somewhat hidden, but is much more out in the open than even 10 or 20 years ago that this trafficking, and of course it's unfortunate, but it will be at the forefront and we'll beat those predators because we are warriors. So thank you, Nina, for joining us today.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for having me on.
Of course, you're a warrior. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.